بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كن لوليك حجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها قليلا.
In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful. This is going to be a panel discussion, inshallah, regarding family structure, Islamic family structure. I'm going to ask to get us started with Quran recitation. Syed Wahidi, please come up for Quran recitation.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. فسبحان الله حين تمسون وحين تصبحون وله الحمد في السماوات والأرض وعشيا وحين تظهرون يخرج الحي من الميت ويخرج الميت من الحي ويحيي الأرض بعد موتها وكذلك تخرجون يخرج الحي من الميت ويخرج الميت من الحي ويحيي الأرض بعد موتها وكذلك تخرجون ومن آياته أن خلقكم من تراب ثم إذا أنتم بشر تنتشرون ومن آياته خلقكم من تراب ثم إذا أنتم بشر تنتشرون. ومن آياته أن خلقكم من تراب ثم إذا أنتم بشر تنتشرون. ومن آياته أن خلق لكم من أنفسكم أزواجا لتسكنوا إليها. ومن آياته أن خلق لكم من أنفسكم أزواجا لتسكنوا إليها. ومن آياته أن خلق لكم من أنفسكم أزواجا لتسكنوا إليها وجعل بينكم مودة ورحمة. إن في ذلك لآيات لقوم يتفكرون. ومن آياته خلق السماوات والأرض واختلاف ألسنتكم وألوانكم. إن في ذلك لآيات للعالمين. ومن آياته منامكم بالليل والنهار وابتغاؤكم من فضله. ومن آياته منامكم بالليل والنهار وابتغاؤكم ذلك لآيات لقوم يسمعون. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنا أعطيناك الكوثر. إنا أعطيناك الكوثر فصل لربك وانحر. أعطيناك الكوثر فصل لربك وانحر. إن شانئك هو الأبتر. أعطيناك الكوثر فصل لربك وانحر. فصل لربك وانحر. إن شانئك هو الأبتر. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات.
It's going to be a panel discussion, and we want to make this as interactive as possible, inshallah. So it'll be as beneficial to all of us as possible. The panel members are going to be, inshallah, Sheikh Hamza Sodagar, Moulana Baig, and Syed Abbas Ayleya. If you could please welcome them to the podium, to the table with a loud salawat, I would appreciate it. Inshallah, to help us get started, I'm going to ask Moulana Baig to give an opening talk.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين. قال الله تعالى وقوله الحق. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم أهل البيت رس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا. صلوات Allah introduced Islam through the Prophet, and this was his final message. Unlike all the previous messages, this message was given not by just one person, but by a family. And that became the core of an Islamic community and the message of Islam. Ahlul Bayt were a family, and hence the message, rightfully so, being the last and final message, had to be given in the form of a family, because it's the family that makes up the society. It's the structure of the family that makes up the basis of society. And hence the example we have of family and what a family is through Ahlul Bayt, and the emphasis of that is how Allah had decreed it and how He had brought it forward. Now when we look at the family, we see there are different relationships in the family. And each of these relationships are special and are sacred. The relationship of a child with the mother, or the mother to the child, or the father to the child, or the child to the father, or the brother and the sister. All of these are relationships that we hold very dear. We have our own life to give witness to that there is that love and that respect that we have for these relationships. But when we look at all the relationships that build up a family, the most foremost relationship, the relationship that is the most foremost, that is the basis of a family, by which a family comes out of, is the relationship of a husband and wife. All relationships come out of this relationship. And when you look at it, you see that Allah, before He even created a father, before He even created a mother or children or brother or sister, He created a husband and a wife. He created a husband and a wife, and all the other relationships, they came out of that. And hence the emphasis of the relationship of husband and wife in the making of the family and the basis of the family. If a person wants to build a family, then first he needs to build a marriage. He needs to build a marriage in order to build a family. He or she cannot build a family without having a strong marriage. And this is why when it came to marriage, Allah said that there are two things that Allah gave to this relationship that is unique to it, meaning that it is a gift from Allah. There are two things He gave to it, and on the basis of that, this relationship is built. And that is mawaddat and rahmah. Two things, love and compassion. He said that this relationship of marriage is built on love and compassion. And when it's built on love and compassion, it will be a marriage. If it's not built on love and compassion, it will cease to be a marriage. This is why many times people, when they discuss a husband and wife, they try to discuss the rights of husband and wife. When a relationship has come down to the point of rights over each other, then it's not a relationship anymore. It ceases to be a relationship. Now it's a compromise. Now it's a compromise. It's not, this is my right, this is your right. This is not a relationship. Allah didn't build a relationship and didn't build a family based on this. He said that the family is built on love and mercy, love and compassion. That's what it's built on. When it goes bad, then we talk about rights. This is my right. Why aren't you doing this? This is your right. You should be doing this. But when there's love, there's no talk of rights. And that's why the relationship must be built on love. And the family, that goes outward. We have in the hadith also, and Ayatollah Mutahhari, rahmatullah alayhi, mentioned it in his book. He mentioned it that, for example, the love that the rest of the family shares is an outcome of the love that the husband and wife share. That the love that they have translates to the rest of the family and makes them stronger, makes them closer. So in end, I want to speak to you as an introduction to family structure, and then we'll discuss, with the ulama being here, about, the other questions you may have. But to understand how it works, it starts with the husband and wife, and that's where the emphasis you see is there, right? In history, with the making of Adam and Hawa, and the rest of us that going to come later from there, and then when Allah speaks about, for example, the husband and wife, He says it's based on love and compassion. When you base it on that, then it's a relationship. And we have to build that relationship, make it strong so that the rest of the family can be strong. just I will leave it at that, and inshallah may Allah help us to gain more understanding and illuminate us with His knowledge and the knowledge that Ahlul Bayt have given us. Thank you. Salawat.
Thank you, Moulana Baig. And with that, I'm going to open up the floor to questions. If you have any questions, I would like you to please raise your hand, and I'll come around with the microphone, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum. Moulana Baig, if you could give some examples. You mentioned that a marriage is based on love and compassion. Maybe some examples to illustrate, so we can understand more specifically what's meant by this.
And obviously, I have more experienced ulama beside me who have been dealing with counseling and husband and wife issues, all their lives. And they would testify that when we look at marriage and when you see marriage, and any relationship, right? If the relationship is not based on love, what is love? Right? Love is, for example, again, that's what we need to understand. And I think that's where the confusion might be. What is love? Love is not what you hear in love songs. Right? That's not love. Right? What is, the actual meaning of love? And I say, you see, love is a higher form of obedience. Love is a higher form of obedience. For example, how many of you have jobs? Raise your hands. Okay, so I see a lot of people have jobs here, right? So when you work and you're at your workplace, and those who don't have jobs, inshallah, may Allah help them get jobs. That's the dua, to make it a poor economy. So when we see, at the time you work, right, and your boss tells you, for example, to do something. If you're a good employee, you will do it, right? You'll do that, right? If you're bad, okay, we're not talking about bad. Now we're just talking about a good employee. So if you're a good employee, you will do that. So if he gave you some work to do, you will do it. But if you see some work lying around there, and he hasn't told you to do it, would you do that? If it's lying around there somewhere, obviously you won't do it, right? Because he didn't ask you for it. He didn't tell you to do it, right? And he won't also ask you regarding it also. If he comes to you and says, why didn't you do that? You can say, well, you didn't tell me to, right? You didn't tell me to do that. So obviously what happens is that you see this person, you work for him. This is called obedience, right? This is where you see the boundaries of obedience are drawn. Boundaries of obedience is only when you are told to do something, you'll do it. But let's say that you're not the employee. You are, for example, the husband or the wife of the owner. Someone who has love. So now you go to work. You're not working there, you just go there. And you see some work lying around. You see, now you won't wait for the person to tell you something. You'll just do it yourself, right? You'll just say, hey, what's this? I'll take care of this. You see, love is that obedience where you don't need to be told, right? Where you don't need to be explained. You do it because you know what your beloved wants before he says it. If he says it, it won't be love. If, for example, it's your anniversary and the husband has to ask you, so what do you like? Then you'll be like, what, you don't know me yet? You should know what I like. Right? So obviously, you don't ask them, you bring, because you know the person that you love. Right? And you bring what you know, because that it's required of love to do like that. And this is the reason when it came to, for example, outside example, when it came to Ahlul Bayt and the Imams also, Allah didn't just stop at itaat. He didn't say just do obedience with them. He said that you should do mawaddat with them, with love with them. Have love for them. Why? Because obedience requires a command. Obedience requires that the Imam actually gives you a command and you'll do it. Love doesn't require a command. You would do it even without being told. Allah knew that a time would come when the Imam will be in ghaibat and he won't be able to tell you anything. So that shouldn't be an excuse for you to say, well, if the Imam's not saying it, I won't do anything. Allah said, no, I require love from you, that even if the Imam doesn't tell you to do something, you are going to stand up and do it because you love him. This is the idea of love. So when you understand what love is, then you will know that yes, when you love someone, you won't wait for something to be done or to be obligated to do something. You would feel the necessity to do it. That's why when a relationship is based on that, that relationship would never reach that point where he says, oh, I don't have to do this, or it's not my right to do this. It would never reach that low level because it's based on love. When the love goes away, then you see it starts to come to that level. This is my right. I don't have to do this. This is your right. You don't have to do this. When it reaches that, then it's really not a relationship anymore. Now it just becomes a compromise. All right, we are staying here for what? Why are we staying together? Right? In order to keep a face, because of our respect and reputation, because it's bad to get divorced. Why are we staying together? This is the reason why Allah says when He speaks about marriage that it is based on love and compassion.
Thank you, Moulana Baig. Do any other panel members want to add anything to that before I go on to the next question? Are there any other questions from the audience this time? We'll take one from the sister side, inshallah. I saw a hand over here. I don't remember. Was it done? Sorry, excuse me. Sorry.
Assalamu alaikum. I have a question for the panel. What would you say to a young girl that is afraid of marriage, afraid of the idea of marriage, maybe because she's seen, unhappy marriages? And I know a few very high quality sisters, and I'm trying to encourage them to embark in this beautiful thing called marriage, but they're really, really frightened because the husband will have certain authorities over her. And what if he's not able to exercise that in a proper way? How can she go about maybe encouraging him or encouraging one another? Thank you.
I guess the burden is on my shoulders. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It's difficult for someone who has seen experiences like that right before their eyes, maybe being part of that experience sometimes, especially, or being a close relative of someone with such an experience. There are probably many ways that people can try and be creative in trying to convince the person that although there are certain negative experiences, but that doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to end up in one of those. So I think one idea with regards to this question is trying to figure out what is it with her, how we can speak to her if it's a sister. Because I've seen that on the brother side as well. Sometimes, at least the excuse maybe for some of the brothers that I hear for not getting married is, hearing these horror stories of what happens. The sisters are not the only ones that are hurt. Sometimes brothers are hurt, right? So either way, we have to be creative in trying to convey this message. You may go to a zoo, for example, and you may have a bad experience from some animal, I don't know, doing something there, and you'll have a bad experience. That doesn't mean then going to the zoo means that's going to happen to you, and so you shouldn't go there. You may go to school. In one school, you'll have an experience. That doesn't mean you shouldn't go to school and school is bad. And I think it's pretty much common sense in trying to understand that concept, and trying to convey it, though, to someone that has been hurt may require us to be a bit more creative, mention different examples, try to get that sense into the person. That's on one hand, and how we can do that, what type of talk we can give, I think it really depends on the person, and so we would have to figure that out ourselves. I would just encourage to be, try and try again, try to convey that message through different creative ways. But the other thing that I think is important for us to think about as a community, and I think there are different people that have got to become part of this, and that is Islam's solution for circumstances where someone does end up in a bad relationship, where the husband, especially because if the wife is giving trouble to the husband, in terms of ending that relationship, there shouldn't be too much difficulty, although sometimes it gets really complicated. But the problem, I think, with what you're referring to is that, if a sister gets stuck in such a relationship, then the options are a little limited. Because in Islam, we don't have this idea of the wife having the right to divorce, husband's divorce. The wife, they will not have, we don't have such a thing, a wife divorcing her husband. What we do have is the husband divorcing the wife, but there is a procedure that needs to be taken, and this is what I'm trying to bring to our attention as a community, especially the ulama that are involved in the communities, and that is trying to deal with these situations. We do, at least in theory, have this, that if a sister is stuck in a relationship where she's being harmed and she seeks help, a scholar who is either a mujtahid or the representative of a mujtahid and has that form of authority, if he is convinced, and it's something that, since it's a responsibility to go and help the situation, that would mean the alim, the scholar, would have a responsibility to investigate and not just allow and say you need to do the work. No, there needs to be proactive effort. So anyhow, if the person, the scholar, is convinced that she is in such a situation and things cannot be resolved, then the solution for the scholar trying to force the husband to divorce is there, and if he's not willing to accept that and to divorce, then the scholar will have the Islamic authority and the responsibility to bring that marriage to an end. God forbid if it reaches that stage. So we do also have this solution, but as a community, I think we need to figure out what it is that sometimes we find that there are problems like this, and the community as a whole isn't able to manage it in the most appropriate manner, where we have such sisters or brothers feeling that fear of getting involved with such a relationship. I don't know.
Thank you. Looks like I have a few questions that I was going to read off, inshallah. Try to keep them in the order that I received them, so just to be fair. The first one is, how should we address issues of family illnesses such as domestic abuse, child abuse, etc., Some mothers are afraid to ask for help for fear of breaking the family and prefer to suffer or just deal with it.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وآله الطاهرين. The subject that I had in mind to address in this family structure discussion was why the kids disobey the parents. And this is also one of those things that touches the lives of most of the families, and it has to be addressed in every community. There are 4 major factors. There are some other factors too, but I'm just trying to address the major ones. There are 4 major factors which are very much instrumental in this matter. The first thing that requires our attention is that the behavior of the parents towards the children. Let's keep in our minds that the parents are the first role models, and in Islamic value system, our household has to be ruled by the divine values. And because the whole purpose of establishing a family is the ubudiyyat and obedience and worship of Allah and getting closer to Allah from ways that were not in our reach without the marriage. So through the marriage, we are trying to do those of the spiritual duties and social duties that we otherwise individually were unable to handle. We are unable to handle protecting our spirituality because Prophet has already said, isn't it right? تَزَوَّجُوا وَإِلَّا فَأَنْتَ مِنَ الْمُذْنِبِينَ. تَزَوَّجْ وَإِلَّا فَأَنْتَ مِنَ الْمُذْنِبِينَ. Marry, otherwise you are one of the sinners. So we must understand as parents that there has to be sidq, truthfulness, amana, amanatdari, keeping the entrusted trusts of Allah. And there are 6 things in Islam precisely which are considered in tafsir by our mufassirin that they fall in the category of amanatun ilahiyya, the divine entrusted trust. So we need to take care of those 6 things. And wafa bil ahad, taking care of our promises. When the children find the parents are not taking care of their promises that they make towards the kids or towards someone else, this is not going to leave the right impression and impact on the spirituality of the children. And likewise, the respect of the children has to be maintained. We are not here to humiliate or disrespect the children. There is a fine line in bringing the children in an Islamic way and maintaining their respect and basically disrespecting them. So we have hadith from the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he said to Imam Ali alayhi salam, Ya Ali, la'anallahu walidaini hamala waladahuma aw wuldahuma ala uquqihima. May Allah send His la'nat on those parents who carry their children to uquq, to the stage where they get disowned from the parents. So it's the parents in the hadith of the Prophet who are actually causing the children to reach a level where now they are entitled to be called aq, disowned. So this obviously makes it very clear the responsibility Obviously, there are children as well who disobey and they are liable for their own act, but there are parents as well who cause the children to become aq. The second important factor that we need to remember, I don't want to take a lot of time and I'm trying to summarize it, is the disputes between the husband and the wife themselves, especially in front of the kids. If there is a conflict taking place, at no cost the husband and wife should be disputing in front of the kids. This is going to leave a very bad role model and impact on the spirituality of the children. We need to respect each other. The husband has to respect the wife. You know, the moral behavior, controlling ourselves from using abusive language, bad mouthing, bad words. It's something which is necessary in Islam. It's wajib to abstain from those haram, unethical behaviors. Respecting the wife, respecting the husband, and obviously when they hold this kind of respect among themselves in their behavior, in their talk, that is what's going to, the children are going to learn the same. Amir Mu'mineen alayhi salam, yeah, I think let me move to the third one because it's going to take more time. The third factor is respecting our own parents. When we as any family, any husband and wife who have established a new household, when they respect their parents, this is how they can make sure that their children are going to learn the same and similar respect. If they don't respect their parents, then obviously it's not going to be fruitful. Man barra walidayhi barrahu waladuhu. The hadith says whoever does good towards his parents, his children are going to do good towards him. So obviously if we are doing bad towards our own parents, our children are going to learn the same, and this is not going to be productive. Amir Mu'mineen alayhi salam has said, "Qum an majlisika li abika wa muallimika walau kunta amiran." Stand up from your place where you are sitting for your father and your teacher, the one who teaches you the ilm and knowledge of Quran and Ahlul Bayt. Stand up from your place for your father and your teacher, even though you may be a leader. So no matter how high in terms of the material life we may reach, we have to stand up for our father. And obviously mother also has the respect. So it is very important that the duties towards the parents are performed by the children so that their children also learn the same. We don't do it for that sake, we do it for the sake of Allah, but this is one of the automatic aftermaths of our behavior. إِنَّ الْعَبْدَ لَيَكُونُ بَارًّا بِوَالِدَيْهِ فِي حَيَاتِهِمَا ثُمَّ يَمُوتَانِ فَلَا يَقْضِي عَنْهُمَا دُيُونَهُمَا وَلَا يَسْتَغْفِرْ لَهُمَا فَيَكْتُبُهُ اللَّهُ عَقًّا. It is also possible that a son or a daughter were doing good behavior towards their parents in their lifetime, and when the parents passed away, they stopped doing the good behavior. They were not disowned and aq in the lifetime of the parents, but now that the parents passed away, they stopped doing good behavior towards them. This son or daughter is not taking care of the debts of the parents, not doing istighfar and seeking forgiveness from Allah about the sins of the parents. Allah will write this son or this daughter to be aq. So we understand in the light of the hadith that even if we were not aq in the life of the parents, but after their death, we can still become aq, because the duties towards the parents do not end at their death. Last of all, which I would emphasize, is definitely the rizqun halal. One of the very major factors which is witnessed in the society. Obviously, There are people doing haram jobs, and there are people doing, serving the zalimeen, working for haram jobs, earning the haram bread for their children. Ayatollah Sheikh Fazlullah Noori, this great scholar in Iran who was hanged before the Islamic Revolution. At the time he was being hanged, his own son was standing in front of him in the opposition with the soldiers of the government, and he was part of the process of hanging his father. And before he was hanged, somebody went and asked Ayatollah Sheikh Fazlullah Noori that, why is that so? Your son is like this. He said, yeah, because when he was a baby, my wife took him for breastfeeding to a Nasibiyya, to a woman who was min al-Nawasib, one of those who hate the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. So rizqun haram has an impact. Ayatollah Mishkini rahmatullah alayh in his Risala of Zikr, there's a beautiful book, Risala of Zikr of Allah. And in this Risala of Zikr of Allah, he mentions this story that one of the great scholars has he never took his children out of his home ever. Was very particular in feeding his children the halal. First time in his life, this alim took his son, who was also a baby, first time in his life he took his son outside the house, out there, where lots of people obviously are there available on the street, and this son started to cry loud. And he has to rush him back to the house. And Ayatollah Mishkini says, this baby was seeing the people in the real faces of the spirituality of a human, which lots of people are in the form of animals. The beastly attributes that we acquire, isn't it right? And those beastly attributes convert the form and surat of our spirituality to resemble with those animals mentioned in the hadith. So we find, because the baby was never fed, Ayatollah Mishkini says, because the baby was never fed haram, he didn't have hijabat and curtains of sins on the qalb. The baby was seeing the people in the real faces. And first time he was taken out and he saw the people in the form of animals, he got, wahshazadeh. He got afraid. He never saw those many animals around him. He was screaming. He has to bring him back to the house. Just like we talk about our urafa, who don't have the hijabat and they see the realities. Isn't it right? Malakut, the batin. So it's very important for our parents. In most of the situations, it's the fault of the parents. If the children are not listening to the parents, in most of the cases that I have encountered in my life, it's the fault of the parents. They need to be blamed first and foremost because they fail to be strong and firm on their value system. Thank you.
How do you differentiate between love and lust? Lust being defined as nafs, shaitan, because sometimes you can convince your reasoning by what you feel.
I would like to actually go back to the previous question and address the point that was mentioned about domestic violence and how that needs to be addressed and how it should be addressed. This is one of the issues that our communities struggle with, and it's really painful when after a long while and knowing people have been suffering sometimes for years, then you get to know that people have been keeping things hush-hush and no one's talked about it until the damage is done. There's psychological damage that sometimes the children develop because of such problems existing and them not being addressed. Psychological problems for the spouse that's being abused, if that's happening. So I think it's very important that we do address this problem. Before I talk about what are some of the things and addressing the question itself, how, especially when there's this fear of maybe talking to someone and trying to seek counseling is going to create or make the problem bigger or a greater problem. Before I address that, first let me mention, for I hope we don't have that in the audience, but it's always good to remind. We are not allowed to physically inflict pain on our spouse for sure. Usually guys are not afraid of their wives inflicting pain on them physically. So it's usually the guys that have to be told, you know, you got to be careful. We don't have that. And sometimes what's very difficult to hear is that you hear people justifying certain things, unfortunately, in an Islamic manner, meaning they base certain behavior on a very wrong and misunderstanding of the Holy Quran or the Ahadith. When you look at the verse of the Holy Quran that talks about, in case, I'm just mentioning this in case anyone has this misunderstanding, وَضْرِبُوهُنَّ, that you're able to hit, that's a very particular instance that I don't want to talk about the context of where that permissibility is there. But regardless of what that instance is, what is permissible, what is meant by hitting, the dharb that is mentioned there, is so insignificant that all of the maraja' say it should not even cause the color of the skin to change. It shouldn't even get red, much less for it to get bruised or anything like that. In the context where that's even allowed. It's not about obedience in the sense that I am going to say this is going to happen in the house, this is the decision, this is where the kids are going to go, this is how the food is going to be made, this is how this is going to be done, and if she doesn't listen, I'm going to be able to hit her. There's none of that. There's a very particular context to that. But even when the context is there, where it is permissible as a last resort, it is a form of hitting that is barely, you can barely call that hitting. All right. So we don't have anywhere in religion where this is justified. With regards to children, whether it's the mother or the father, yes, we have a little bit of allowance, meaning that this idea that we cannot touch the children at all, well, no, we have a little bit of ability to, in order to help and to train the child, in some instances, to, you know, hit the child. But again, first of all, it's not trying to make myself feel good. He or she didn't listen to me. I get angry and I beat on them. That's not something that's going to be allowed. If they're doing something that's dangerous, if they're doing something that is going to harm them, in order to prevent them from that, then we are allowed to. Not that I basically, just because I'm sick and tired of that behavior of that child, then I get to inflict pain and hit. So first of all, I want to say that there is no Islamic justification for this. The form of domestic violence that we find. It's a cultural thing in Eastern culture as well as Western culture. My mom is from a Western background, from the United States of America, and my dad is from an Eastern background. They both have forms of punishment that were very severe. Sometimes the Western form of it even more severe. But now, in today's context, if you do anything, then they're going to call the cops on you, or they can at least. But so anyway, my point is that it's cultural. It doesn't come from Islam. The allowance and the encouragement of any of that. In fact, if we are going to behave in that way, we have got to expect that there's going to be severe punishment after death, if not in this world. Okay. I repeat, I'm not sure if it was, I think it was here on Friday where we gave the talk about justice in the family. We mentioned this one hadith that beware of oppression. If you oppress a person, that the person who's being oppressed has nowhere to go except for God. Okay. You don't want to be the oppressor in that situation. If I'm a parent and I'm abusing that child, that's an example of that, because that child has nowhere to go. So we have to be very careful. This is one point that I'd like to raise, and we need to remind ourselves constantly to be careful of this. I'll mention this story. They say, if I remember his name correctly, Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, one of the companions of the Holy Prophet, passed away during the life of the Holy Prophet. When they were going to bury this man, the Holy Prophet participated. He walked there. He was part of the burial ceremony. He helped out when the his grave was dug out. The Holy Prophet went down in the grave. He lied down in the grave, maybe said certain adhkar, certain du'as, and got back up and got out of the grave. They buried this man. His mother was present there, and she said, Alhamdulillah, paraphrasing here, Alhamdulillah, my son, he's got a very good, probably a good place right now in paradise, and he's enjoying his life over there. Why? Because the Holy Prophet is participating in this way and in this manner in the burial of this son of mine. The Holy Prophet said, no. He is dealing with adabul qabr, the punishments of the grave, the pressures, and the very severe punishments that are mentioned in the ahadith. Why? The Holy Prophet says, because he mistreated his family. His family didn't mean his mom and dad in this instance, because his mom is over there proud of his child, her child. It means his wife and children. Okay, so we got to be very careful of this. Parents, when it comes to the children, mothers and fathers, we don't have the right to treat children as we wish, as we desire, as we feel. I feel angry, I've had a bad day. Even shouting, we have to be very careful with this. It's dhulm, it's oppression. So that's first. But then when, God forbid, this problem develops in the family and it needs to be dealt with, there's a hadith, I believe it's either from Imam al-Baqir or Imam al-Sadiq, salamullah alayhima. Usually we mention this hadith in a different context, but I think it applies here as well. According to this hadith, the Imam says, إِنَّمَا هَلَكَ النَّاسِ لِأَنَّهُمْ لَا يَسْأَلُونَ. People face difficulties and problems. Their lives are ruined because they don't ask. They don't seek counseling. This fear is a shaitanic fear. The more you allow this problem to continue and you refrain from seeking advice and counseling from the right counselors, all right? We got to be very careful. We speak to someone that knows, that is just, that is trustworthy, and they can control what they know, and they can control their mouth and not to go and spread that information. They're going to be trustworthy, and they're going to keep that as a secret. But it's necessary that we do go and seek counseling. We do go and speak. Yes, maybe things, if he finds out, I'm afraid, don't be afraid. Rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is your support. You're doing this for His sake. He's going to help you out. Even if maybe at the beginning when he finds out, maybe he says this or he says that. But eventually that's the way that you need, that's the path that you need to take in order to try to get out of this problem. And it is important for the sake of our own spiritual well-being, our responsibility towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We can't allow ourselves to remain in that situation without seeking advice and counseling. Okay. And for the brothers especially, but also for sisters, because I've seen this a couple of times, or actually many times, unfortunately. And again, this is oppression. This is an example of oppression. Brothers that are religious, they think they are religious, and then their wives are having problems with their behavior, but they feel like they can't go and speak anywhere because the husband's going to get upset, and any time that he finds out, then they're in big trouble. Husbands should not be like that. If the verses of the Holy Quran say, look, if you guys are facing difficulty, if you're having problems, you should, both of you together, should try to go and seek counseling. These are the verses of the Holy Quran. We don't do this. Not only do we not want to do it, we don't want anybody else to go and do it. We don't want our spouse to do it. Why? Because we're afraid that word is going to get out. People think we're religious people, and now things are going to get... What are we trying to do? What is being religious? What does that mean? These are clear instances of oppression and dhulm that we've got to move away from. So, I'm sorry it took a bit long, but I thought that was necessary. And briefly emphasize this point again. Whoever is facing that type of a problem, rely on God. Consider it your responsibility to seek counseling. A responsibility. Don't think that this is your right to counsel. It's your responsibility. You have to go and seek advice. But go to someone that is qualified. They're trustworthy. They know what the solution is. They know the Islamic perspective, and also not just the Islamic perspective, but they also know how to help you and guide you through your particular problem, inshallah. Sorry.
Thank you for the emphasis on that topic. Is there a member of the panel that would like to tackle the question regarding differentiating between love and lust?
Not my area of expertise.
All right. How do you know when you're in love, and how do you know when you are lusting? Right? My friends, it all depends on the object of your lust and object of your love. Right? What happens is this. The principle is this. You cannot love something that is ugly. You cannot love something that is bad. What happens is this. Because the idea of love is that it comes from ma'rifat. It comes from recognition. The more you know something, the more you will fall in love with it. But with one condition, that the thing must also be worthy of love. So now, you might know a lot about frogs, but you can't fall in love with them. Right? Yes, you're the expert on reptiles, right? But you see, you won't be able to fall in love with them. The more you know them, yes, you have more knowledge of it, but it will send you away. It will make you go away, right? It will repel you. Love grows with ma'rifat. Lust declines with ma'rifat. right? That's why, for example, if you lust over someone, you'll see the more you get to know that person, the less you will be likely to be with him or her. Love is the opposite way, right? When you choose someone who's worthy of love, then the more you get to know him, your love will increase. Your love will increase. And that's the reason the idea that love is there, what it means is that marry someone who's worthy of love, who's righteous, whose character is such that no matter how much you get to know the other person, you will be in love with them, and that love will increase. Right? Look for that sort of a person, right? Whether a man or a woman, right? Husband or wife, right? Look for that person that when you know that, you know what, if I get to know this person more, would I still love her or love him? Or is this a shallow person that, once I go in him, then I'll know what kind of a crazy and stupid mistake I did by marrying him or her. So this is the difference between love and lust for us to just understand. Salawat.
Can I add something?
Go ahead.
Yeah, love. We love the person only for the very reason that that person falls in the category of a man or a woman who deserves to be loved in the eyes of Allah. So actually, a believer does not love anyone or anything other than Allah. The reason why a husband or a wife love their spouse because that person has iman and taqwa. Isn't it right? Iman in Allah and the fear of Allah. So it all returns back to Allah. And the moment we discover our spouse is an obstacle in the way of me believing and obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, believing in and obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Islam says talaq is wajib. Talaq is not makruh all the times. There are 4 rulings in the Sharia about talaq. In some cases, the talaq is haram. In some cases, talaq is makruh, disliked by Allah. In some cases, talaq is mustahab, recommended in the eyes of Allah. In some cases, talaq is haram. Wajib. And the case in which talaq is wajib is where a husband or a wife becomes an obstacle in the way of my iman and taqwa. So I cannot have ubudiyyat towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nothing is more important than Allah. No one can be in the way of ubudiyyat of Allah. If somebody stands in the way, I will remove the obstacle. I will continue to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So talaq becomes wajib in that case. So obviously it comes down to the fact that in the real sense, we are not loving our spouse. We are loving the spouse because the person deserves to be loved, as long as the person deserves to be loved in the eyes of Allah, and only if he or she deserves to be loved. So actually we are loving Allah, not him or her.
Next question is regarding marriage. What are the qualifications one should seek in finding a spouse? And it's open to any member of the panel.
I'll say a few and then I'll let him say a few. Right? What are the things you should look for when you want to get married? Just like Moulana just spoke about. Again, when Allah says, that you should love your partner, then love is only when there is taqwa. And so, really a person should look for that, should look for piety. This goes a long way. You see, the love never grows, out. It's always growing. It's always increasing. you will see that those who are true muttaqi people and those who truly love Allah, the height of their love is at the end of their life. Right? That's the height of their love, because every day they know more about each other, and the more they know of one other's character and their faith in Allah, the more their love grows. So this is the reason that when you want to get married, look for someone really who truly is pious, truly is a person who understands Allah. Now, by taqwa, I don't mean someone who is, you know, what, you know, how we call it, you know, in English, you know, since we don't have a phrase for that, in Urdu it's called sharif. Yeah, someone who, not noble. This is a pseudo muttaqi person, you know. A pseudo muttaqi person is someone, you know, who comes to the masjid all the time. He prays this and that, and you know, he shows that he's muttaqi, reads a lot of du'as, and everyone thinks he's muttaqi. But when the time will come, he's ready to run away from the imam, right? So a person like that really is not what you call a muttaqi person, right? You know, this is why it's very difficult to know where that taqwa is, where true taqwa is. To understand, I think, you know, if you look at the examples of the companions, I think it's very good to listen to that, you to look at those examples. You know, for example, you have an example of a religious person like Abu Musa Ashari. You know, he's a religious person, right? Prays, fasts, reads the Quran, is always seen in the masjid, you know. And he is the head of the masjid. Everyone looks up to him as the leader, right? And then you have a person like, for example, Malik Ashtar, right? Who is rough around the edges, you know, a little bit tough. And hence, you know, when you look at him, you won't look at him as a muttaqi person in the norm or how the word is used nowadays. But at the end, who was the more muttaqi person? Who stood by the imam the most? Right? And these, I think, you know, when we look at those people who were around the imams, then you can truly see, okay, you know what? This is the type of personality, you know, who would be right. This is the type of personality that will be good. Right? And, you know, obviously look at them when they were young, not at the end of their life. Right? You know, yes, we know Malik Ashtar at the end of his life. Okay, how was Malik Ashtar when he was young? Right? And you know, that's what you need to look for. Right? And I think, you know, a lot of it has to do with intelligence, with aql. How smart is he? Right? Look for intelligence. Don't look for education. Right? Usually education makes you dumb. Right? It takes away from your intelligence. The more you educate yourself, the more you're indoctrinated. The more you stop thinking, right? And start to trusting the words that you're reading. And so what happened is that being intelligent is a whole different thing. And a lot of people who are educated are not intelligent. The reason is because it doesn't go hand in hand. Right? And this is the reason you look for someone who's intelligent. Why? Because intelligence will lead to taqwa. Right? Will lead for him to make the right decisions in life. Right? It'll help him to do that. So these are some things, yeah, that I'm saying. And I'm sure Moulana can add if he wants to.
Usually in sessions where you talk about marriage, you know, that question is probably one of the ones that's going to be popping up sometime. Sometime one of the first questions that comes up. And people are like, oh, here we go again. And pretty much the answers that are given are the same old answers. And the reason why I didn't want to comment is because, you know, we kind of should know overall what we should be looking for. But what I thought of just while Baig was speaking to touch on, I remembered a hadith that I'll say something starting with this hadith. There's a hadith from the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He says, he emphasizes that you should try to make the first priority on your list of qualifications or the qualities that you're looking for as a potential spouse to be religiosity, deen. What is the deen of this person? How really religious, as Moulana Baig was emphasizing on, how much deen do they really have? Is that something that's important in their life or is it not? And he says, if you take this as the main quality and you focus on this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to give you beauty and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to give you money. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to make you enjoy your married life. Every time you walk into that house and you see your spouse, you're going to enjoy seeing her or enjoy seeing him. And money is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to provide. But if the reason why you're looking or the reason why you want to get married to this person and the most important thing on your priority list is looks or money, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to give that to you. Meaning, you get married to the person you thought, this was the best person, the best looking girl in town, okay, that I could get married to. You're not going to find that beauty. Because that beauty is not going to last forever. It's going to change. Sometimes shortly after marriage, it may change. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in control. This is another thing that I was thinking about myself, that beauty is relative. I look at someone or another person. This brother was telling me, I hope this is not being, I have trouble sometimes with these recordings going online. I spoke somewhere in Detroit a few years back, and I mentioned this one story about his sister somewhere. I'm not going to mention the location again because that caused me trouble. And I said, I was giving an example. I didn't say anything bad about her. I just said that, the way she said something, it meant that this is what, I was giving that as an example of how the Western culture teaches us certain things. Okay, and she saw that and, it was a big mess. So now, some brother somewhere was telling me, I can't even, what is that? Siberia. I guess I'll skip on the details. Basically, somehow, there was talk of this little girl, maybe a 5-year-old girl. And this brother was saying that she looks very good, and I'm afraid of looking at her. All right? And, I'm afraid that, it may be a sinful look, and so on and so forth. Is it okay if, this clip goes online, and so on and so forth? It may cause people trouble. Can you look at it? I said, okay. I looked at it, was like, okay, the girl is a regular girl. I don't see how you can look at that and feel lustful. Okay. So my point is that, these are two different individuals. The way I feel about a person looking good and somebody else thinks this other person looks good, right? That's something that can change. Right? You think you like a certain person, they say Shaheed Chamran, may Allah bless his soul, he was one of the great warriors that was successful in the battle with his nafs as well as the battle with tyrants. He fought the Zionist regime before the revolution succeeded. He married a woman in Lebanon. Do we have any Lebanese in the audience? Okay, mashallah. A couple here in some of the communities we have. Lebanese are generally very picky when it comes to food and when it comes to looks. Okay. Generally speaking. Am I right? Generally speaking, I've picked up, they're very, very, very particular about the taste of food and about the looks and other things as well. Anyway, so he marries a Lebanese woman. Shaheed Chamran was bald at that time. He lost his hair on top of his head. And maybe a few months after his marriage, his wife, I heard this directly, they had a recording of his wife. His wife says that a few months after marriage, one of my friends told me, "Why'd you marry a bald guy?" And she said, "My husband's not bald." And she said, "No, he's bald." She's like, "No, he's not bald." So go and look. She said, "After a few months, I realized that he's actually bald." Okay. She loved this man so much that he looked to her to be the most perfect man, even in terms of what he didn't have. Okay. If we understand this hadith completely, okay, and to the full extent, if we are judging, if we are selecting someone purely based on looks, all right, the way how great that those looks are, a couple months down the line, a year, those are not going to be the most attractive looks. They're the same, they're the best, but now I go on the street and I see other girls and now they start to look more attractive to me. I don't feel that I have the best at home anymore, okay? So there's a lot to say about that hadith. It says that the first priority we need to have is the deen of the person. If you have that and you make sure you look for that in your potential spouse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to give you beauty and also wealth and money. And if you get married on the basis of this person, like the reason why you choose between this person and the other person is on the basis of looks, like this person looks a lot more attractive, or the other person, or based on finances, you know, he's a lawyer, he can make more money, or he's a, I don't know, depending on what type of a lawyer he may be, or he's a, I don't know, a physician, he may make more money, or this guy is rich, his parents are rich, or whatever. If that's the criteria, you're not going to get it. The hadith says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will leave you with that wealth. God says, I'm not going to provide you with sustenance anymore. You think that's going to provide for you? All right, I'll leave you to it. But if you go for the deen, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to guarantee that rizq. Now the reason why I emphasize this and I try to expand on the hadith a bit more is that sometimes I feel out here in the West, we're a little too particular about those looks especially. I found this. There's a good expression that some of the brothers in LA were mentioning. They said, you know, we're looking for Hizbullahi Barbies. Okay. That's a bit, you know, too picky. All right. Don't be that picky on looks. Looks are important, but I know people who haven't gotten married for years just because they haven't found someone that's beautiful enough for them. That's also, they're looking for religiosity too, but the looks are so important that out of all the religious girls in the city, any city, not this particular city, the city that they live in, they haven't found anyone that's actually all that. And with regards to religiosity, I would like to say this, that we're not looking for a ma'soom person either, all right? We're not looking for someone that is sinless. We're not looking for someone that has never made a mistake in their life, okay? We can't find that. We're not like that. We can't expect the other party to be like that. So we got to be careful. Sometimes, you know, this Facebook phenomenon is sometimes very problematic. A person makes one mistake, one time. They posted a picture that they weren't supposed to. And that's going to come and haunt them. First of all, be careful, all right? Just be careful. If you're involved with any form of sin, this is kind of off topic, but let me say this. If you're involved with any form of sin, make sure you keep it a secret. All right? Don't make your sin public. That's twice the sin if you make your sin public. All right? Keep it to yourself. Don't post it. Don't talk about it. Don't mention it to others. Don't be proud of it. I've heard some very weird stories about people posting stupid pictures online on their Facebook page. Absolutely stupid. And you should know that it has effects. Now, the other side of that is, I'm saying this, that if we are looking for religious people, we've got to do a comprehensive research. Maybe that public information online on their Facebook page or whatever can come in and help us try to understand this character. But we shouldn't judge just based on something that's posted there and say, that's it, this person is not a religious person. We got to put all of that together. Maybe there was a mistake committed. Maybe they've repented. If we can see that they are trying their best, this is the principle of religiosity. If they are trying their best, and we should all be trying our best to implement the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sometimes we make mistakes, but if it is our intention, if we are striving, if we are trying to implement the laws of Islam, then that person who has this, they have the quality of religiosity. That is what is meant. Besides that.
Thank you. You mentioned something about money when selecting a spouse. The next question has to do with money during marriage. So it's worded as, how would you resolve issues regarding money or income that come up, especially in the U.S.?
I think money has been addressed by Sheikh Hamza already. Obviously, what our concern should be is that we, when selecting a spouse, should be particular to make sure that the person has the fear of Allah, so he makes money from the halal. Now, what is going to reach my hands at the end of the day is destined. So there is no logic for a believer to care about, let's choose a spouse for the sake of making more money. This is not a right intention. We should instead have the intention, let's choose a spouse which can help me protect and elevate my spirituality to obey Allah collectively together better than anyone else. So we can together serve the walayat of the Imam of our time and do those of the social and spiritual duties together that I cannot do without getting married. That's the right intention. So basically, money is destined. You know, neither you nor your husband can make more than what is already written. Didn't the Prophet say to Abu Dharr, salamullahi alayhi wa sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, didn't the Prophet say that قَدْ جَرَى الْقَلَمْ بِمَا هُوَ كَائِنْ إِلَى يَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ? Didn't the Prophet say that to Abu Dharr? That means the divine pen. The pen has already moved about what is going to happen till the day of judgment. That means the divine qalam has already moved to write the destiny on a lawh al-mahfuz. It's a done deal. And our Urafa say, قَدْ جَفَّ الْقَلَمْ بِمَا هُوَ كَائِنْ إِلَى يَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ. The pen, the ink of the pen has dried up after writing. That means there is nothing new that me and you can add. So Allah's wisdom is absolute. His knowledge is absolute. We are not here to alter His absolute wisdom. Isn't it right? So we should not be focusing on the money. And even if we focus, we are not going to get because of our focusing. We are going to get if it is destined. If it is not destined, we will never get it, no matter how much overtime you can work at your workplace, right? And marrying a person does not guarantee the money. I personally know people who have degrees, bachelor's degrees, master's degrees. Some of them are physicians, but they're jobless in the US. Physicians. Can you imagine? There are some who make 7-digit salaries, and there are some who are physicians, but they're jobless. Every now and then they're sending emails, Moulana, please send me some dua so I can get a job in some hospital. So you cannot say just because you got a good education and degree, your education does not guarantee your risk. Allah guarantees the risk. That we need to be, mindful. Thank you.
Should it be not in front of children or in front of children?
I think there's a wide range of what is referred to as the expression of love. Sometimes the word love can have very, very particular meanings as well, and certain meanings are obviously not allowed to be expressed in front of anyone, including children. But if what is meant is, for example, the husband hugging his wife in front of the children, or the wife deciding to hug her husband where the children are around, or if the husband decides to kiss his wife's hand, for instance, or maybe her cheek. Is this something that is permissible or is it not? Well, the way you can do it is going to be very different, of course. All right. Let me put it this way. If it's something that's going to be lustful and it's going to be clearly a form of expressing not just love, but also it has some form of expression of that's lustful, all right, then that's going to be something that, well, I don't know if I can term it as haram, but it's definitely something that's going to have a negative impact on the children. But, coming home and just giving an easy hug or even kissing the wife's hand, which is something that some of the ulama practice, or the husband's hand, or even the cheek, you can't really show it, right, to show what exactly I mean. But, a small little kiss on the cheek is not going to be something that's going to be problematic. And in fact, some of the ulama, I'll mention this, I won't mention his name. Again, these recordings going out sometimes creates problems. My wife was attending, both of us were attending a session at one of the very respected scholars' homes in Qom, someone that some of you may also know. But again, I won't mention his name. But she said, my wife was saying that the way it was, the sisters were on one side of the curtain and the brothers were on the other side. I was on the side of the brothers, so I don't see this. But where the sisters were, it was kind of the entrance, and the husband had to walk from over there and go through the sisters basically to come on the brother's side. So when he came, the scholar came to inside the house. Well, obviously everybody was ready, they're wearing their hijab and all. But when he came in, his wife greeted him, and in front of the other people that were there, well, I don't have anybody to show you what exactly he did, but he kind of, touched his wife's cheek a bit in a very kind way. And my wife saw that and she was telling me, hey, you don't do that. But the point being that expressing genuine love in a way where it actually shows love, after knowing the distinction between love and lust, it actually shows love, that there's a loving relationship between husband and wife. Where there are children, that means the children see a loving relationship between mom and dad. That's actually very good. It's very beneficial. It's very beneficial. We have hadith even for your Muslim brothers, of course. Express your love. Oh, it's not nice in this culture to go up to a brother, if you're a brother, and say, hey man, I love you. Of course, depending on how you say it. But anyway, expressing that is something that is referred to as good. In a family, for the parent, the spouses, to express that form of love to one another is generally good for themselves, but also in front of the children. If it's the form of love that is distinguished from lust, it is actually going to have a very positive impact on the children. And also, I would like to add, this wasn't part of the question, people usually do this, but I want to emphasize how important it has been in the Holy Prophet. Emphasize the importance of showing love to the children as well, telling them that we love them, all right? Sitting down, giving them hugs every day, all right? This is good. It's very beneficial. It's rewarding in this world and in the hereafter. It's a worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Thank you. I have one other question for Moulana Ayleya. How can we encourage younger siblings to respect the older ones and vice versa? How can we encourage younger siblings to respect the older ones and vice versa?
How we teach the younger ones, obviously by giving respect. If you give respect to the younger ones themselves, that's how the baby is like a copycat. You do what you want the baby to do towards you, and it start doing it. Isn't that right? So how you teach the babies to start respecting the older ones is that you start giving respect to the younger one, talk to the younger one in the most respectful way, and that's how those will, the younger ones will learn to respect and talk back in the same respectful tone and tenses towards the elder ones. So basically, we have to give respect, to teach respect and to get respect.
Thank you.
Let me just expand on. This is a commentary and trying to expand on exactly what Ayleya mentioned very briefly. I would like to kind of on that same idea, the way the parents treat the children. If the parents are constantly shouting at the child, hey, do this, why didn't you do this, and so on and so forth, right? Then the younger child sees that. What are they going to do? They're going to do the same thing. Okay. And if this child is being treated in that way, and that's the treatment they've received, then that's how they're going to treat the younger child. So it really has to do, as was mentioned before as well in the talk that Ayleya mentioned, that if you see these problems of the children even disrespecting their parents, in most cases, it's because the parents didn't treat the children right. Because that's where the children got it from. In most instances, yeah, there is the external influence of television and Western culture through friends and so on and so forth, but that's not the only negative influence there. The most important influence is within the house, and the positive or negative influence comes not from the child, but from the parents. So if we want that, we got to be careful, we got to make sure we give them the right children. Treat the children as human beings that understand. Speak to them. Don't treat them like sheep. Okay. Speak to them. Know that they understand. All right. And if you communicate in that way, then you will see that they're going to communicate in the same way as well. Obviously, at times, not necessarily, sometimes they would make mistakes the same way that we would make mistakes. But the more we are careful of how we treat them, you will see that their behavior is going to develop in that very same way as well.
There's a story that you know, somebody came to the house, knocked the house of his friend, and the child came out and said, well, my dad is not at home. So this person said, well, when he's going to come? He said, Ino digana guftan berit begid aganistan. This he did not say. He just says, just go and say that he's not there. So basically, the children are learning what we are teaching them, isn't it right? So if we want to hear the most respectable sentences and you know, respects from them, then we have to give them exactly what we want to listen from them.
The next question is regarding girls. What is the priority when you are ready to get married? One, looking for a career and becoming a professional, or two, getting married and creating your education, or three, what age is good for marriage? Can it be postponed?
Tough question.
Education is going to fulfill your dunya, marriage is going to fulfill your deen. Education is half your dunya, marriage is half your deen. So which one is more important, deen or dunya? So from there you can decide. And not to say that you don't do the other thing, but you know, what do you give preference to is what we are saying.
So the next question has to do with issue of muta, temporary marriage. And I know that's not going to be easy to give a brief answer for it. But,
It's halal.
Do you want me to read the answer, or the question, I'm sorry? Has the issue of muta been properly discussed in regards to the Western Islamic society? What are the particular criteria to practice muta?
Again, you know, whoever has this question can come to us afterwards. You know, it's a long explanation. If you're just asking if it's right, of course it's halal. There's nothing wrong with it. Are you mature enough to get into a relationship? That's what the question is, right? You know, that's what you need to look at. Are you mature enough to understand what a relationship is? Right? Even if it's a temporary relationship, it's still a relationship, right? And if you feel that you're mature enough, then you can indulge in a relationship. Otherwise, you know, if you're not, and you see that, you know, you're more interested in watching football than, you know, taking care of responsibilities, you shouldn't be involved in a relationship.
Thank you. Next question is regarding domestic violence again. Have any Islamic scholars written articles, advices, or books on this issue? And two, is there any Islamic organization in the U.S. that a person could refer to? And three, what is the obligation of local alims, leaders in the community? And they mentioned also that a person on average will be subjected to 15 years of abuse before seeking help, typically.
Yeah. You know, I really don't know what the purpose of this session was going to be. If we're going to make the answers like a two-word answer, you can't give answers like that. So if we either want to like discuss this matter, or we're just going to keep saying, you know what, you can bring your answer afterwards and just end the session. Okay, so if we want to talk about, like answer these questions, it's going to take a bit of time. About books and articles being written on this particular topic in English, generally, our recital salawat, please. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. New ulama are coming in, inshallah. Ya Allah. Unfortunately, generally speaking, our Islamic information available in English is very poor, extremely poor. So there are definitely things written in other languages, but whether that's been translated to English, I'm not aware of that. Is there any particular organization in the United States, an Islamic one, that deals with this? I'm not aware of that. If anybody is, please provide that information for me as well. Okay. But I've received emails about that, but is that organization dealing with people that are involved with abuse to try to help them and give them counseling? Or is that trying to provide shelter and other but that's where it's reached a stage where, I mean, my question is this, like in that, in your explanation as well, it's still a person that's left the relationship, and first you take care of that, and then they want to, but what if there's a family that's, you know, dealing with this problem, and they haven't separated, and she's just trying to figure out what to do and, you know, seek help in that, are they, like, mm-hmm. And do they do that for other states as well? Like, or is it limited to Maryland? Okay. Well, that's one. There may be. It's good to kind of share that information. As I said, I don't reside here. I'm back in Qom, so I'm not aware. If anybody else, please provide that information. Share that information. But of course, the other thing is make sure these organizations, if we are helping people, or if we are suggesting for people to go to them, make sure we know the organization well enough before we suggest people going to them. As I said, if we're sending anyone to counseling, if we want to go for counseling, we have to make sure the party that we are going for counseling to is qualified. That means that they have answers for us. That means that they know what our religious restrictions are, and we need to work within that framework. There are people that can provide like practical solutions, like you can say this or do that or go to court, these are your rights in this country, and so on and so forth. Those may be solutions, you can do that, but are they something that is approved of? I want to be a Muslim and deal with this as a Muslim. So if we want to provide that, if we want to provide that information, first do a background check, make sure that the organization knows what they're doing, both in terms of the Islamic knowledge as well as, and this is an area I think the organizations are probably good at, but just to put it out there, that they're able to deal with the problem and provide good practical steps of what the person can do. But I emphasize to also be, make sure that they know what the Islamic framework is and to work within the Islamic framework, inshallah. And the last part of the question was what? Like 15 years of something?
What is the obligation on local?
Oh, the obligation of the ulama. I mean, it's easy to sit here and say, hey, you know, I'm living in Qom, but the obligation of ulama is to do this or to do that and so on and so forth. Okay. And just, you know, say that and leave, for me personally. Okay. But, and I know at least some of the ulama are involved with this type of activity. Some a little more, some a little less. There are some that are not fulfilling that obligation. There are some that may be not too capable of that. As I said, look, dealing with this problem is not an easy task, because it's not just about knowing Islamically what the framework is. Okay, it's really not just about that. Trying to help people make the right decision requires other skills as well, that the person may not be like, look, I can't get involved with this. So it's good to have that. The ulama do need to get involved, at least by talking about this, by encouraging people to try to come forth and try to give support for such families. Maybe there can be bodies created within communities that are under the supervision of ulama, so the ulama can keep check, make sure they provide the religious guidance of how things are handled, but that that body can deal with the technicalities of what needs to happen in that particular situation. So I strongly believe that the ulama do need to get involved. I do believe and agree that not enough work is being done in this area, and I firmly believe that, but I can't really speak because I'm not really someone that resides here, so it's easy for me to say that, but it's very difficult for the ulama to actually do that. I think if you ask any of the ulama, they will say that it's something that they also believe in, but hopefully we hope that the communities, all the different members, not just the ulama. Sometimes if you have people who are aware of such problems and they take an initiative to do something about it, but they take the right measures by going to the ulama, seeking their counseling, they do the work, they do their share, and they make sure that it is Islamic work by referring to the ulama. I mean, there's so much you can do. I mean, if you have thousands of people within a community, a couple of thousand, or even 1,000, or even a couple of hundred, dealing with family problems, with the religious affairs, washing the deceased, doing the Salatul Mayyit, doing the marriages, dealing with all of that. I mean, it's one person in that community, for God's sake. I mean, how much can they do? All right. So the other community members have got to step up to the responsibilities. If they see that there is a problem, they need to take a stance on it, but they need to come and try to work under the guidance of someone that can provide the Islamic guidance for it, which are the ulama, inshallah. So we hope both the ulama, or Allah gives them the tawfiq to do more of that, but also the community members who feel this responsibility, who feel or know of the problem, to try to take a more proactive role in trying to resolve this problem, inshallah.
Thank you. Would you like to take on another question? Okay. Next one I have is to Moulana Ayleya, or whoever wants to answer. What's the child's role or responsibility in mediating or helping to resolve issues and arguments between the parents when the child is old enough to see and understand there are problems, but but the child can't take sides or disrespect one side or the other? So
Well, in the case of disputes, step number one, if we, the elders, can resolve the matter according to the Islamic tenets and principles ourselves, among ourselves, amicably, friendly, this is the step number one. We should try doing that. If the husband and wife are unable to handle it themselves, children, I mean, giving a respectful advice, it's okay. They can also give, if they are watching, if things are done in front of them and they are adult, they are mature enough to, know what Islam has said, because we need Islamic solutions to the problems. We just need so-called solutions. We don't need so-called solutions. We don't need any kind of counseling, out there. We need Islamic counselings which are helpful for our spirituality to please Allah. So if the children are grown up enough to give the Islamic advice in a respectful way, they can mention it to the parents. They can always do that in a respectful way. But I don't think that the mediation job can be done by the children successfully, in most of the cases at least. I don't think it's feasible.
first step is that the husband and wife themselves address the issue when they are not in anger, they are calmed down, they address the issue in Islamic, according to Islamic principles. If they can talk and resolve it, very good. If they can't, then they have to refer to an alim, who is the wakil of the conditions fulfilling mujtahid. So this is the right way of it. That's the initial step. After we are unable to resolve, the initial step has to be to contact an alim, not the final step at the 11th hour, which is again in most of the cases, if not all the cases, is not going to work when much water has passed under the bridge already. So this is not going to work. So obviously the answer to this question, in a respectful way, if they are grown-ups and they are knowledgeable enough to respectfully mention what Islam and Quran has said. Any mu'min can give advice to any mu'min in a respectful way. They can also give advice to their parents. But like I said, it has to be, and the appropriate way is to contact an alim. Because usually the conflicts are not that simple, that you can just give one advice or few advices and it's done. Usually it's not like that. So you have to be psychologically able to analyze the situation in the light of the teachings of Islam, and so you can tell and prescribe what is necessary in that scenario. Sometimes there are things behind the scenes happening. Sometimes there are words unsaid between the lines. With the counselor, Islamic spiritual counselor, it's his job to try to discover what's the root of the matter. Isn't it right? So that can be done by, obviously, a qualified scholar.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I think we're going to have to end here. Unless there's any burning questions that the audience has at this time that can't wait. Okay. Oh, there is one.
That's a good question, brother. And the fact is that, yes, a lot of things that we do as Muslims based on our culture and our understanding of culture, not on the principles that we see Ahlul Bayt live their life on, how they practice their family life. And these are the understanding of the family right now, and the principles by which we see Ahlul Bayt and Allah try to giving this message of family. If once we hold those principles dear to us, and if we truly start to believe in those principles, then there will be a change of course that we take, and then we will live. Then we will be able to see that the spouse I'm looking for, am I looking for someone who's based for my deen or for my dunya, right? Or for example, the kids I want to have, the family life what do I have? Is it my American dream or is it my Islamic dream, right? What type of dream is this that I'm trying to live? And hence I think the whole attitude will shape, and I think there will be a huge shift if our people go back to the principles that Ahlul Bayt had and that they taught us. And if you can hold on to those principles, then you see that we will not have, most of the problems that we see ourselves in right now, where our children and ourselves and the adults also are so much engrossed in their, own ignorances, whether it has to do with their own nationality or their ethnicity or whatever it is that they're ignorant of, and that ignorance is leading their life to the hellfire. So it's much better that, for example, we look at that and we see that and know how the Ahlul Bayt live their life, apply those principles, and you see that change, inshallah, will come first in us then we have to give that example to others. For now, inshallah, I think I will end it. If anyone wants to add something to that.
Okay. Please recite a loud salawat for our respected alims for staying overtime to answer questions. Inshallah, there will be namaz.